Hello and welcome to the College Football Fan Show. I'm Bayou Burt and I'm going to be your host on this series. And today I've got the pleasure of having my very first ever guest, Mr. Chase. Welcome to the podcast, Chase.
It's good to be here. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. And Chase is going to be having a real interesting perspective to one of the reasons why I wanted him on here is one, he's a good dude. We've met working out at a fitness club, and I've known him for what, 6 or 7 years now,
Yeah, quite a
something
while.
like that.
Talked a lot
Yeah,
of football.
yeah. Talked a little bit of football right out of the gate, so I knew his backstory, and I also knew one interesting thing about him is that he's got a lot of interest in a lot of teams, but three in particular. And if you're seeing the screen right now, you'll see those, and I'm about to ask him a little bit about that. But first of all, right up front, I'd just like to ask you, Mr. Chase,
Yeah.
right? What is it about college football that stirs you up inside?
So I think about this a lot too, because I have a lot of friends who love NFL. And, I can watch some NFL football, but there's just a couple things missing from that game that is there in college football. It's got to be the tradition, the fan bases, so many unique fan bases, the experience on game day. There's just so many factors that play into college football that just make it unique. And just, I'm thinking about next weekend, and this weekend just ended, and I had no other sport experience has given me that. And, I've met so many people from so many fan bases that just make it so unique.
Okay, wonderful. I think that's a great
Yeah.
answer. And I think it resonate with a lot of folks who are also, and by the way, just as a reminder, this is all about the fans. We will talk here about some of the other things like polls and who's going to win and that kind of stuff. But there's like dozens and dozens or if hundreds of people that do that. But our
Yeah.
focus here is on the fan experience and what's meaningful and emotional and all that good stuff to the fans. So with Chase here first, he's got three hats up on the board, and he's obviously a fan of the game, the whole
Yes.
atmosphere, like he just mentioned. But he's got three teams, so lots of times we get to see these high school guys coming out, and they're highly sought after, and you're highly sought after as a fan.
Yes, sir.
It's really difficult for you to make your call. So you got three hats on the table here. So go ahead and tell us how hard it is for you and who are you going to pick to be your top team?
Man, there's arguments to be made for all three teams here. And I'm sure, throughout this show, we're going to get into a little bit more depth about, where I became a fan for each team. Uh, but, gonna have to go ahead and scoot the Red Raider to the side a little bit. Love Texas Tech, but that's not number one.
Not guns up today.
Not guns up today. Oh man. And then it comes down to A&M and Oregon. Very, very tough. I've spent a lot of time in College Station. I love the Aggies. I really do. But for today, we're gonna have to pick the Duck.
All
Once
right.
again.
The Ducks. All right. Just
Woo!
all right. Oh,
Go
got a little
Ducks.
swag going. So what is it about the Ducks that you think edges them out? Because you could probably be happy being the top fan of any of these schools, right?
Oh, 100%, 100%. I've spent a lot of time around each of the programs. But the thing about the Ducks is that was the school that I chose as a kid. That was the fan base that I embraced completely on my own, no influence from anyone or anybody. And I never looked back. So that's why I had to go with the Ducks because it was my pick.
Ooh, I love that. I do some work in the leadership coaching, and one thing I tell folks is that, part of that is helping them to make their own choices, to
Yes, sir.
circulate their wisdom back to themselves. Because when you make the pick, you own it, and you can just run right with it, right?
Yes, sir.
So your answer lines up completely with that experience. I'm loving what I'm hearing, and let me just talk a little bit. I've been fortunate to be a few places in college football,
Yeah.
and one of them is an experience I had at. Let me get a little iron ringing out at Oregon, Autzen
There you
Stadium
go.
in September of 2009 is a night game on Friday night against Purdue Boilermakers, and the Ducks won. So I got an opportunity there, and I met the Duck and some of his nice looking friends there uh,
Yeah.
during my visit there. So yeah, great. And let's segue though to this picture. Tell us about this. Who's this guy?
So that was me in my younger days. So that was actually my second Oregon game. It was in the Alamo Bowl here in San Antonio. I live in Houston, Texas, so it's easier to get out to one of those games as a young man. And the little context behind that, I'm outside in that picture at the pregame. It was about 43 degrees and raining that day
Oh,
because the Alamo Bowl is in January. So it was not warm by any metrics, but we were having a good time, that's for sure.
wow, that's awesome. So good thing the Alamo Dome has a roof, huh?
Yes, by the time game started, I was glad to be back inside.
So how long were you outdoors in this outfit, and how long did it take to put all this on?
Oh man, the paint probably took about an hour to an hour and a half for the full body paint because we went into it, tried to make sure we had the lines done up nicely, made sure it looked nice, and I was probably outside for about 4 hours. But the good thing was I was a fan favorite among the Oregon fans there at the Alamo Dome, so I had plenty of tailgates, free hot dogs, fires to sit by, so it ended up being okay. I had a free ticket into a lot of tailgates.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. So tell me a little bit more about that free ticket to the tailgates, because I've been blessed to be at a lot of stadiums, and what I find, and my advice to anybody who's a fan who visits,
Yeah,
I happen to be an LSU fan. I love the whole game. I love a lot of teams like you do, but when you go to LSU, if you take the ribbing real easily, the next thing you know, you're part of the family and they're giving you the best food and the best drink possible. So
yeah.
how's that working for you and your travels and your experience in that particular event in Alamo?
Man, so the Alamo Dome, I will say, I've been there twice for Oregon games. First time they played Texas, and I have a good story there. Second time was against TCU. That's when I was painted up. So I found that the Texas fans were actually much more welcoming than the TCU fans were. Uh,
Oh,
and both times the Oregon's fans were great. They came to travel. I think they were just happy to see a friendly face all the way down here in Texas, if we're being honest. So all of them were wonderful, very welcoming. And the Texas fans were actually quite friendly. Now, I think it might have just been because they thought they were going to win, but they were a lot more friendly than TCU. They were actually the Texas Christian University was pretty hostile, but you know,
whoa.
yeah, I was a little surprised there, but
Wow. So that is very interesting. Well, we want to hear about your experience, but I'll tell you a quick story because you know me. I'm going to tell some
yeah,
stories.
yeah.
I visited, and this is, I know, hard to believe, but approximately 300 universities in my life.
Wow.
And TCU has the best student body out of any student body that I've ever experienced. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting to hear your perspective. And I guess maybe the game day atmosphere and that the juices flowing might have had a
Yeah.
little bit to
Yeah.
do with that, right? Maybe you weren't being as friendly to the TCU frogs as you could have been, huh?
I don't think they liked my colors when I was fully painted up.
Oh, and also they didn't know you were Texan, right? They for all
No.
they knew, you came down from Oregon, and
Yes.
you were pure enemy.
Yes. Yes. And I guess we were also a little obnoxious. We had some duck calls going.
That is awesome. Yeah, duck calls. So that's that kind of a standard thing that you do when you go to the games? You bring that duck call with you?
Oh, 100%. It's a great noisemaker. It's definitely something a lot of teams haven't heard before. So on a big third down, we're blaring away on the duck calls, and those things get pretty loud.
They do. And again, just quick story about Udson. It's really an interesting and rather small stadium relative to many others. But the way that stadium is configured and the angle and the elevations, the
Yeah.
sound goes down pretty good. I was about 20 rows up in the end zone, and it gets pretty loud. And I did hear some duck calls while I was there.
Awesome. Awesome.
Absolutely. All right. Well, congratulations on all three of your fan bases. Do you want to say a little quick something about the experiences with the other two schools?
Yeah, of course. Of course. So the Texas Tech, My sister is an alumni, and so that's where I experienced my tech coming from. I already had A&M in Oregon, and man, it is a party school. I will tell you that. Um, I was 21 when I went up there for the first game that I actually went to, and I'm glad I was. But man, it's probably one of the most rowdy fan bases between college football, basketball. Every single game I've been to there, they get rowdy. I would not want to play against Texas Tech at the Red Raider Stadium. It's a tough place to play just because of how rowdy the fans are and how they want to get under your skin. But
Okay.
as long as you're rooting for their team, man, they'll welcome you with open arms and hand you a beer.
So you're gonna wear a lot of red when you go to Lubbock.
That would be a great idea. That'd be a great idea.
All right,
Um,
awesome.
and they have a fun saying, win or lose, we booze. Uh,
Ooh, I like
definitely a
it. I
party
like it.
school. Definitely a party school.
Well, I'm from Louisiana, so
Okay, yeah, you
there's
understand a
some
little bit of
drinking
that.
and partying involved there as
Oh
well.
yeah, Baton Rouge gets down, that's for sure.
All right, tell me about
But,
the Ags.
the Aggies. So that's probably the school I've spent the most time at. Man, I've probably been to 15, 16 games now at Kyle Field, but it's also the closest to me living in Houston. So the proximity helps. And I got to say, if you're an opposing fan, Kyle Field's probably one of the better places to be that I've experienced. Everyone there is very friendly. As long as you're somewhat respectful, you can be cheering for the other team, and the Aggies be like, "Come on, come sit with us," you know. Very, very welcoming atmosphere. It's a good atmosphere, and even if the Aggies aren't doing quite as well that season, that stadium still fills up. Usually about 80 to 90,000 people, even on a losing season, which is impressive. The show out, the dedication of the Aggie fan base is impressive for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I've worked with for Aggies and everything of the sort, and
Yeah.
the Aggie spirit is a special thing for sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, well, great. Okay, let's move it on a little bit here. Now that you got the Oregon hat on and you're showing plenty of respect and love for the other schools as well,
Yes,
and I'm
sir.
sure there's some other ones. Is there any other school that maybe almost had a hat up on the table?
Ooh, it's got to be U of H for sure. U of H is probably a number four. You know, it's not quite in the top three, so I didn't include the hat in the list here. But yeah, that's actually both of my parents are alumni from U of H.
All right,
Father went to A&M first, and then got his master's at U of H, and then that's where my parents actually met. So
all right.
a little bit of special feelings there. I've been to a couple U of H games, and it's really close to home, but not quite as deep into it as the other schools. But I'll enjoy watching some U of H. I'll root for them more so on the basketball side though.
Oh yeah,
They
yeah.
focus a lot of their
It didn't hurt to be number one in the country here in the last couple of years, huh?
yeah yes sir.
All right, and so yeah, I got my masters there, so go Cougs. So I'm with you on that too. Not my top team, but definitely a team I like to support. And the new stadium's super nice,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Great atmosphere, do good tailgating. They're doing a really good job of putting that together and getting on the map. And with their fitting the Big 12 now, a lot better, bigger games coming to
yeah,
town. So it's going to be pretty exciting. We'll have to go check out a game together.
yeah. It sounds great.
All right. All right. So moving on, just tell us a story. You live
Yeah.
20 something years now. Can you pinpoint a point in time when like you launched yourself into the world as a college football fan?
Man, I was basically born into it. Living in the South, growing up with a family who college football was basically the world on Saturdays. Every TV in the household had some game on. A lot of times it was multiple games. Um, and every halftime at the big games, Aggie games, of course, because of my father, we were watching Aggie games. And at halftime, we'd always go outside and we'd throw a football around at halftime, to pass the commercials. And then we'd go back in.
Nice.
And so that started my college fandom. And then I remember specifically, I'm an Oregon fan, right? I picked Oregon. There's a specific time where an A&M game had been on. It was kind of late. It was a night game, and the TV had switched over to Pac-12 After Dark. And I had no clue what that was up until this point because we never
Whoa.
stayed for Pac-12 games. And then all of a sudden, I see these crazy uniforms. And I was the kind of kid that loved crazy colors. And so I see these neon yellow and green uniforms. I'm like, hold on, I can get behind this. And so I'm like, hold on, don't turn the TV off. I'm a young guy. I'm probably 10 to 12 years old. Um, and then I find out they have a high flying, exciting offense, and I start to see what Pac-12 After Dark was all about. And from there, man, I started doing my own research, looking on ESPN, checking when they were going to play next. And from there, it just exploded. And that was my team. So that's
Oh,
basically how my college football fandom started.
so what's the name of that program you saw? Pac-12 what? Big or
So there was a big nickname because Pac-12 games on the West Coast were often really late for the East Coast and Central Time people. So it was a Pac-12 After Dark. A lot of times the games were going on at 10 o'clock or even up to midnight.
yes.
So it was Oregon and man, I want to say it was Arizona State.
Okay, the Sun Devils.
Yes, sir.
Oh, awesome. That must have been a really good, exciting game. It got you
Oh
stirred
yeah.
up right out the gate, right?
Yeah, that Christmas I was asking for all the neon green gear.
Ooh, so Phil Knight, if you listen to this,
Yeah.
the strategy and marketing and all that stuff's working really good, and you're a good
Yes.
example of that, huh, Chase?
Yes, sir. 100%.
Okay. So that's a wonderful story. I love it. I love it. So let's move on and let's talk about food. Showed you
Yeah.
tailgating experience in Oregon. I
Yes,
met
sir.
a few people at their tailgate and had some, pretty simple stuff, but it was really tasty.
Yeah.
Burgers and hot dogs and a lot of fun and ribbing and all that good stuff. So when it comes to food, what comes to mind for you?
Man. So from Texas, number one has got to be the barbecue sandwiches. A tailgate here in Texas, a lot of times you have people staying up for 24 hours, getting up, tending to the pit, and they have some delicious barbecue sandwiches. So I always look forward to that. Peanuts. I like peanuts
You
personally.
do. You're a real
Yeah.
southerner.
And that's something they're real easy to take wherever you're going and, real easy to snack on. Um, Hot dogs, 100%, jumbo dogs. We got a lot of those here in Texas as well. Everything's bigger in Texas, and it's including the food. And then beer, man. I enjoy a good beer with my barbecue sandwich and peanuts.
Ah, a little cerveza, huh? What kind of
Yeah.
beer of choice do you pick?
Whew, man, it really depends how hot it is. As it gets a little cooler, I like some dark lagers, I like something a little richer. But man, for the first couple weeks of college football, I gotta have something light. So, Coors Light, Miller Light, Dos Equis, is a little bit darker, but that's another one I can go with. Something not too heavy, something
Okay, so
refreshing.
now if like November something's heavy, what are you drinking then?
Oh, I'm drinking Guinness. I call it
Straight
a
up
good old liquid
Guinness, huh?
sandwich. Liquid sandwich.
How about Shiner? Oh, speaking of Texas,
Okay.
does it work its way
Yeah.
in?
Shiner box good. You got to have it with the bottle though. Yeah.
Ah, I got you. I got
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
And
it's
you
only
can't
about
always have
an
those in the
hour and a half
stadium.
drive from here. So have you been there?
Uh, not to the brewery. No, that
Ooh.
needs to be on my bucket list.
It needs to be a Cosmo Sputzel and the whole Czech background is really interesting.
Yeah.
They have one of the best tasting rooms, so I highly recommend it.
That's exciting. Okay.
All right. Well, great. All right. So some peanuts and some standard stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
so Oregon's color's green, and a lot of people like to smoke stuff in a green egg. Have you seen anybody with green eggs? Do you have one?
I do not personally have a green egg. It might be something I need to invest in as I continue to tailgate more.
Okay, I
I can.
suggest you look into it and you could brand it, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Get the O on there. This is the duck egg right here. We got some good stuff cooking up in here.
You better believe it. All right, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so one of the things I really want to focus in on with folks like yourself and people throughout the land and the world uh, are meaningful relationships that you
Yes, sir.
have formed. I know there's probably like a bunch of hats, a bunch of people, but pick one relationship that you think is just really just special that you relive experiences with. It's a lifelong type of thing for you.
Man, it's got to be me and my father. Honestly, that's a relationship and it continues to grow. So for example, I am shaking with excitement because tomorrow we're gonna go see A&M versus Notre Dame at Kyle Field.
Ooh,
And that's going to be a huge game. But man, from childhood on, no matter what was going on outside of college football, that was something that we could, put everything aside and, just be fans and be, best friends, be father son. And man, that's something I'll be able to tell my kids and my grandkids about. All the memories we've made, the different games we've been to, the different games we've experienced. And it's like nothing else. As a college football fan yourself, I'm sure you've had a couple of those experiences with some people before that you'll be talking about for generations.
Absolutely. And, it's not about me, but in another episode, I'll have somebody interview me and I'll tell my version of that. But I love your answer. And I think that's one of the things, like growing up, just to talk a little bit about my story, is like my dad and I got in trouble a lot for how much time we spent watching football. But then after my father passed, my mom got very sentimental and she became a big fan. And it was so wonderful to watch that process. And I think what ended up happening, and one of the things I really want to highlight on this podcast is the shared, meaningful, emotional, rich experiences with somebody over a lifetime. And I think people that aren't sports fans, they don't get it. They think it's about the X's and O's and wins and losses. And yeah, all that stuff matters. But really, when you come down to it, you're at Aggies, you're at Caulfield and you're swaying and all that stuff that I would never do, but
Yes,
you
sir.
love to do, right?
Yes, sir.
That's got to be stirring it up in you. And have you done that with your dad?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I
And
bet you
it's
got
every
some
time.
pictures and videos and stuff like that that maybe another time you could share with
Yeah.
me.
I'll get them to you. I got some fun pictures from that too.
That's awesome. Okay, so we talked about Caulfield, we talked about Autzen a little bit,
Yes,
and some other stadiums around the country. And but first, before we move on, okay, try to put your Homer self to the side.
sure.
Eggs, okay, playing against the Irish. What's your best guess at what's going to happen results wise?
It's going to be a defensive battle. 110%. I believe it's going to be a relatively low scoring game. I really think it's going to be whoever can get a couple long bombs in.
Okay,
It's going to be the difference maker. Whoever can get that extra touchdown. So A&M has the home field advantage, which definitely helps. But both defenses are stacked. Notre Dame specifically in their backfield, A&M specifically on the defensive line. So it's really, I think, going to be defensively, and then whoever's offensive line can hold up better. Notre Dame has some questions on their offensive line, and A&M's offensive line has been less than desirable the last couple of years.
hmm.
But they have some depth on there. So it really just depends if the new coaching regime has been able to turn the offensive line around for A&M and how quickly Notre Dame's been able to get back to health and get back up to speed on their offensive line. So it's going to
Okay.
be a defensive battle versus the offensive lines for sure.
Okay, do you think it matters at all that Elko has Notre Dame familiarity?
A little bit. Not. I think it's very minimal.
Yeah,
Uh, if anything, it would come down to if he knows that player a little bit, there might be some oddity that gets under their skin.
gotcha.
A certain situation that he doesn't deal with quite as well. But I would also expect for them to be training for that. If there's something that I was weak on that Elko knows to exploit, okay, let's practice that.
Okay.
So, I mean, I feel like a good coaching staff would, and I feel like Notre Dame doesn't have a half bad coaching staff. So, but we'll see.
All right, good answer. So a tough, low scoring, defensive oriented battle, and one big play might make the difference.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, we talked a little bit about stadium, so let me pivot to this next inquiry here. So, whole landscape, I've been blessed, I'm 30 something big stadiums all
Yeah.
around the country. But what about you? Where's one stadium experience that you've seen on TV and you're like, and I gotta get there someday because I just have to experience the electricity or whatever associated with that environment.
All right. So it's going to be two, and they're just about equal. So I'll start the first one. I'm gonna show you a little bit of love. I gotta get to Tiger Stadium, Baton Rouge at night. I gotta go. I have enough LSU friends. I've just got to go experience it at least once.
All
Because
right.
I've been told multiple times there's not going to be a better experience than a good LSU team at Baton Rouge at 6:30 p.m. So that's got to be up there. It's also relatively close to home. I have enough people I know that are fans that I got to give it a shot. I got to get out there. And then, of course, number one, I haven't got to travel to Autzen Stadium. I'm a huge Oregon fan, but it's all been games closer to home. But now I'm coming into a young man myself, and I almost got tickets this year to Oregon, Ohio State, but it wasn't quite
Ooh,
in the budget. But
ooh.
that and it was at Autzen Stadium, but not quite this year. But within the next 2 years, I plan on taking a trip up to Eugene and going to see a game. I've got to. I can't call myself 100% a fan if I don't at least try to get up there to a game.
Well, I'm giving you full credit because your heart is obviously, a tough call, but Oregon. So, but yes, you definitely do. And Hobby Airport's 15-minute drive and it flies to
Yeah.
Portland. That's not far from Eugene. So, I like to give people action items. When I used to work in the space program, you always get action items. So I'm giving you an action item to make that happen
Yes, sir.
from Bayou Burt.
Bayou Burt, gonna get it done.
All right. Okay, so whether at home or in a stadium and the games in the stadiums you have been to or whatever, is there one game that really sticks out that you'll be talking about for ages and telling that story over and over and over again?
Yes, yes. For me, that one game is the 7 overtime game against LSU.
Oh,
I was not at the game, but a little context here. I was with my ex-girlfriend at the time. Her
yeah.
entire family are diehard LSU fans.
Oh, God
And if
bless
you
you.
remember, it was a Thanksgiving game around Thanksgiving time that weekend.
I do
And
remember.
we were at her Thanksgiving dinner with her entire extended LSU family. And I remember that game being on. And I'm the one Aggie fan in the room with probably 20 LSU fans.
Holy
And
smokes.
again, there was some controversial calls that went both ways at certain times, but it was like for the game, it changed the game. That game changed the way that they did overtime. And it was just the atmosphere, having all these people, giving me a hard time, but in a good sense, they couldn't be too mean to me. And it was a great experience, and it's just the hostility, yet the camaraderie, of watching a game together from opposing sides. It was a great time, and it'll always be
Wow.
one of those fun stories.
Yeah, you'll be telling that for years, and I'll be hiding from that story for years. I think there was a cup, 74, 72, that somebody showed me, and I'm like, I don't need to see that.
No.
But I was about 20 feet from here watching that game in my living room, and I was just trying to reflect on the positive moments. Joe Burrow, man, he really showed out in that game. Wow. And you got
Yes,
to
sir.
see it in person. So, wow, that was something, huh?
Yes, sir. 100%.
Okay, so my next inquiry for you is, you know, you you've talked about some of your favorite stadium experience already. You kind of gave me one of the answers already, but out of the three, which game sticks out the most for you for Texas Tech and for Oregon?
Okay. Okay. So for Texas Tech, it was actually my second Texas Tech game I've ever been to. I believe it was the end of the 2021 season. It was their season finale at Red Raider Stadium, or AT&T Stadium. And they were playing Iowa State.
The Cyclones.
Um, yes, the Cyclones, I believe they were 7-3. And Texas Tech was 5-6. So it was a must-win game for bowl eligibility.
Mm.
And we had partied all day up in Lubbock. And I remember getting to the stadium, and it wasn't completely full, but that place was rocking. And I was right next to the student section, and I was with a bunch of alumni. And I remember being a lot of controversial calls. And on TV, I went back and watched it. Some of them were a little less controversial than what we were seeing there at the stadium. Now there were some that were still very controversial, but it just
Did
seemed
you
like
watch the replay sober?
yes,
Okay,
yes,
that kind of helps. Be a little bit more
yes.
objective,
Oh,
huh?
oh yeah, oh yeah. But it just the way that the game was shifting. Tech was probably up 17 points. And then it's almost like there was a shift in calls. All of a sudden, every call was going Iowa State's way. The momentum was being shifted by the refs entirely. They'd be bailed out on a third down over and over and over. And it just kept getting closer and closer. And then I remember it got to the point where they were down by three. right? Um, and I was like, man, like everyone's going nuts, giving those refs a hard time. Half the student section got kicked out of the stadium.
Wow.
Like, and of course, so they're getting kicked out, and all of a sudden they're running to other parts of the stadium, and we're like, get in here, get in here. And I remember the staff were trying to get him out, and like, you can't take all of us. That was kind of the mentality. And even though, probably 5,000 people got kicked out, that stadium got even louder. And you had probably some old fans in their 60s or their 70s that probably haven't gotten up and stomped their feet in years.
Holy
And they
cow.
just, it was wow, electric. And it ended up coming
Electric.
down. Yes, electric. It ended up coming down to a last second field goal. And I want to say it was somewhere between 55 and 63 yards. And Texas Tech nailed it. And so we became bowl eligible. It was an upset win, and we all stormed the field. So I've got videos of me storming the field in Lubbock, and it was an awesome time.
That's beautiful. And I like how you said we, because you have one team that you struggle to pick as your top, but you have three we's going up right here, right? Plus, you
Yeah.
eventually have four we's. And
Yes.
that's the thing I think some people don't understand about the game of college football is you get to pick several teams because there's hundreds of them to pick from, but you might have one that's the we, right? But
Yes.
I like how you weave that. And also the emotional and electricity. Did you feel the vibes in the stadium shift along with those
Oh,
calls?
Oh man, it went from us just being rowdy, and disliking the calls to the whole stadium we're on a mission right now to help this team win this game and make Iowa State's job on offense and defense as hard as possible.
Well, that's that we, right? And that's a
Yes,
thing
sir.
about, I like to say that college football, okay, so a little nerdy here,
Yeah.
background with rockets, you got oxidizers and fuel.
Hmm.
Well, the fuel is, and you put them together and then you get propulsion.
Yes, sir.
So, like the players, the coaches, the stadiums, all that, that's kind of the fuel. We have to have that. But the
Hmm.
fans are the oxidizer. And when they come in and they get that ratio right, man, the stadium just zooms, right? Electric,
Yes, sir.
emotional, and the we factor is so big in college football. And you talked a little bit about pros versus college, and I'm the same as you. I have my history. I got to go to Super Bowl 44, see my Saints win the Super Bowl. That was amazing.
Yes, sir.
But it can't touch the experiences of winning national championships and being in the stadium and that electricity, right, that you're referring to, and that we factor, which I
Yes.
think people that don't understand college football don't fully understand. It's like European soccer, right, or Brazilian soccer. Is this we-ness that
Yeah.
brings everybody together and makes it so meaningful.
Yes, sir.
Right. Well, good answers, of course. So, speaking of that, if you were like to run into somebody from Manchester United or somebody from Camp Nou in
Yeah.
Barcelona or wherever, and they are like huge into, FIFA football,
Yeah.
uh, and you were to make a case that college football edges them out for excitement, could you and would you make that case?
I believe I would.
What would you
And
tell them?
so I've met plenty of soccer fans, and there's some pretty devout fan bases there as well. They get pretty rowdy. But what I would probably end up like going to is the fact that every weekend there are probably a dozen college football games that you could call absolutely electric. Sold out stadiums, fans just giving it their all, players giving it their all. I don't see there being 12 soccer games with that much oomph behind them every single weekend.
Hmm.
It's just the amount of fan bases and the uniqueness of the fan bases, how every fan base is a little bit different. They have their own traditions, they have their own fight songs, they have their own history. The rivalries have their own history. It's just the depth to it and the volume. The volume and the depth of college football, I think outweighs the soccer by a little bit there.
All
I'm sure
right.
there's some soccer games that can compete with some of the top college football games, but I don't think they have quite the volume that we do.
So it comes down to the number of highly meaningful, highly electric games you
Yes,
think
sir.
would edge it out in favor of college football. I tend to agree with you, but I've been to some soccer games abroad and it gets pretty intense too. But Yeah, you got to give somebody a tiebreaker. I'm with you.
Yes, sir.
It's college football. Hey, this is the college football fan show after all, right? Come on.
Yes.
Come on. Gonna be a little bit of a homer here, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm a little biased, a little biased.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of being a homer here, you can be a homer for this next question if you want.
Okay.
But what team that you think has a chance to win the national championship that you're like, oh, anybody but them?
Okay, this adds a little bit of intrigue to tomorrow night, but it's Notre Dame. And
Really?
it's been Notre Dame. So as an Oregon fan, I don't know if you remember the 2012 BCS National Championship.
I do.
Notre Dame went in there and lost, what was it, 56-0 to
Yep.
Alabama. And that was a year that I believe Oregon, I don't think they would have beat Alabama, but they would have at least given a run for their money. And Notre Dame didn't play a single ranked team that year.
Gotcha.
And so I felt a little shafted as a fan myself, and then as a fan of the game, having to watch a team that clearly, not that they were a bad team, but they were not the top two team. They didn't have the strength of schedule, which is a lot weighed into a lot more now. But I just worry. So the best team on Notre Dame's schedule, in my opinion, is A&M. Florida State does not look like the team that they're supposed to be, or they
Mm.
were expected to be after this last weekend, and that was, it's A&M, Florida State, and USC are the only teams, in my opinion, that are notable on their schedule. And so I worry that they end up going undefeated or near undefeated and then slipping into the college football playoff and maybe taking a spot from somebody who might be in a little bit of a tougher situation in the SEC or the Big Ten that plays more of those high caliber teams.
Okay, okay. Well, I think Marcus Freeman's got a great squad. Got a lot of good things going, like you said, good defense. So if they sneak in, I think they have a fair chance. But I understand. I asked you to be a homer, so in the spirit of that, you can't root for Notre Dame. It's just something that's just you can't do.
No, sir. No, sir. And I would love for them to prove me wrong. They just haven't done it yet. If they
All
were able
right.
to go in and win it all, I would rescind my disdain for Notre Dame taking somebody's spot.
All right. So, Mr. Freeman, if it's in the remote chance you see this, there's a challenge for you. Make it
Yes,
happen.
get it done. Change my mind.
Get her done. Change Chase's mind. I like it. It's a challenge. It's out there. All right, great. That's the big thing about college football too. There's a lot of wagers, a lot of emotional battles, a lot of, it's that's the other thing I think that makes it so good. And I know FIFA soccer has the same thing, but it's like sometimes it's almost like you're rooting against some hated team more
Yeah,
than you're rooting for your own team, right? And
it's
if that's
happened a couple
possible,
times.
it's almost anybody but them, right? And we all
Yes.
have those, and we may or may not share them, but you just did yours, so there we go. But they're not in your top four team; they're probably in your bottom 130 team, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're getting close to wrapping up here, so let me go ahead and let me bring this home a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's talk about the landscape of college football. So many things. We're in the wild, wild west. NIL, playoffs are coming online, all kinds of different things that are happening in the world.
Yeah.
So if you look at the whole landscape compared to 10 years ago, right? Because you've been a fan for 20 something years or so.
Yeah.
What's the one change that, for good or bad, that you would like to make mention of in the modern game versus what you grew up watching?
Ah, man, it's got to be the expanded playoff. Um, I think it might be expanded a little too much.
Hmm.
But I think it's all part of working out the kinks. I think they're going to find a sweet spot. But like going back to that 2012 game, a 14 playoff would have been huge, or
Hmm.
maybe a 6 or 18 playoff somewhere in there, just to help those teams that. And then last year is the biggest example. You had Florida State and Georgia. Florida State fans, oh, we should have been in. Georgia fans, I think Georgia was definitely a top four team last year, or argued for it. And they would have definitely benefited from an expanded playoff and a chance to get back in there and maybe play one of those games that could have gone either way.
Hmm.
So in my opinion, it's the expanded playoff, the opportunity for those bubble teams to get a chance. Um, and then there's late season surges, maybe one of those teams that started off and dropped a game early, and then they finish out and everybody realizes, they're one of the top 8 teams in the country, but they have 2 early losses. A lot of times teams find their chemistry. So I think that's a huge bonus or addition to the game that, I wanted to mention is the expanded playoff. Now, I do think they'll end up getting it right and lowering it a little bit. I think 12's a lot, extends the season a little bit too much, gives me a little bit more of an NFL vibe, a little too,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe extending it to 8 or 6 or 8.
All right, excellent. So you went positive on me and at the college playoff system, and I tend to agree with you. I had an opportunity in 2007 to present my proposal to Chris Fowler at game day for the LSU Florida game that year, epic game. And
Yes, sir.
so I'm a fan of the 8 team playoff as well, with some bowl ties in and keeping
Mhm.
everything. But he kind of made mention to me. I don't put words in his mouth, but said something to the fact that this might be the perfect solution, but it's going to take a while. And so since 2007, I've been watching those words of wisdom from Chris Fowler play out. And who knows? They're talking about going to 14. We'll see. But that's your input. You like the playoffs, and I agree with your reasoning and your rationale.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go ahead and let me ask you the following question. I used to work where we do a lot of simulations,
Yes, sir.
and I still do, in fact, in a different way. So let's simulate stuff. Imagine that I am the august body of experts in college football, and I'm in a panel, and I'm calling you up to Dallas, to Jerry World, and there's a convention room there, and we pick Chase as our fan rep. And
Okay.
Chase goes and gathers inputs or offers his own, and he gives some important counsel to the powers that be that says, hey, look, without college fans, nothing happens. There's no tickets purchased, there's no merchandise, there's no TV rights, there's no money, there's
Yeah.
nothing, right? You might have games, but it's in a field, right? So since you have that leverage as the rep of the entire entity of the fans, what counsel or advice or input would you make to the committee if you had that voice?
So it goes something along the lines of, the game is changing, and you don't necessarily want to stop change. Everything's constantly adapting with NIL, with the expanded playoff, with new rules, new penalties. Um, so of course things are going to change, but within that change, I think it's very important for the committee to remember what makes college football so special. Don't forget about the traditions. Don't forget about the fans. And don't forget that it's different than NFL. A lot of people are fans of college football because it's not the NFL, or they're more fans of college football because it's so different from NFL. So my biggest thing to the committee is remember what makes college football great. And do everything in your power to, cherish that and preserve that greatness while still adapting the game and, continue to improve things and make the changes that need to be made. Yeah.
Beautifully stated. I would echo that sentiment too. The distinction that you referred to earlier in this podcast that I share. Pro football has its things, college football has its things. College football is just a superior game and product and fan experience. Let's keep it that way because,
Yeah.
money talks, and we know that's important. We know the powers that be have to do all that stuff. But at the end of the day, if you put a dent in what makes college football unique and special and electric and just so amazing, maybe we've taken a step back, right? Is that basically what you're saying?
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I'm a little nervous to see where things go the next couple years. And they're going to be towing a fine line whether they can, keep that, uniqueness of college football. But I'm excited to see how it turns out.
All right. All right, Chase, this has been fantastic. Thank you for being my very first guest on this podcast. I think it went pretty smooth. We're going to go straight
Yeah.
with it. No editing software or anything like that. I'm going to learn all those tricks and trades as we move forward, but I want it to be organic,
Yeah.
authentic, and real and meaningful and all that stuff. And man, have you done a fantastic job and honoring us with your presence and your stories, and just fantastic way to kick it off. So couldn't appreciate it more.
Yes, sir.
And I've got this trombone here. I played in a high school band, and it's just one of many elements that makes college football so special. Every school has a band. I'm honoring all the members of the bands with my trombone. I played and recorded the Oregon fight song last night. I learned it in about 5 minutes and sent a clip to Chase, but I'm going to spare you guys of that. But just as a nod to the bands and all the other elements, which went throughout this podcast series we're going to talk about, I just wanted to make reference to what the heck does Bayou Bird have his trombone out for? I can play it, but I won't accost you with that today. But Chase got to hear it, and I did pretty good, didn't I?
Yeah, yeah. For
At
learning
some
it
point,
last night, I was impressed.
okay, thanks. Yeah, it took about 10 minutes to put it together, and I hadn't played the trombone in years, but it came back pretty good. So anyway, a nod to all the other aspects, and hopefully we'll have some members of the bands from the lands out there on the
Yeah.
podcast in the future. So if you're watching this and you're a member of a band and you got some great stories to tell, wow, I bet you do, and we'd love to hear them here. And that goes for anyone else that's watching as well. Uh, just make a comment, do the likes and shares and all that stuff. I'm not going to bug you about all that. It'll happen organically or it won't. That's my approach to this. But in any case, it's been a fantastic way to kick it off. And Chase, you're a really great person, and I thank you so much for being a part of this.